Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I've got 5 running backs for Week 6 fantasy football action that I think are must-sit players. I don't like their matchups this week. There's been some telling signs throughout their performances so far this season, I think make them a little bit more concerning here, and I want to try and have you guys avoid these running backs in as many situations as possible. If you're new around here to the channel, make sure to click that subscribe button and turn the bell on so you're notified whenever we come out with some new fantasy content. We've already got 6 videos up for this week through Monday and Tuesday, so go check those out as well and drop a like on today's episode. But without further ado, let's hit that intro and get straight in to our first must-bench running back for Week 6. As we get into today's video, just a quick note, I am repping SFS merch in today's video. If you'd like to go check some of that out and see if you want to get some for yourself, the link to the shop is in the description of today's video, or you can head over to my website, sizzlefantasy.com, and check out the SFS shop tab, which will direct you to that apparel store. So, with that being said, Miles Sanders, the first running back up on the list. This one was too easy for me. Now, these are running backs here that I see as very, very low-end RB2s this week, or even creeping into RB3 territory, and that very well could describe the output we get from Miles Sanders here in Week 6. Nobody's been able to run on Tampa Bay. This has been one of the best defensive units against the run over the course of the last 2 seasons now. The names they have up front: Vita Vea, Ndamukong Suh, Shaq Barrett. Devontae David is out for this game, so that could play somewhat of a role, but they've still got Devin White and other backers that can flow down and plug up those running lanes. And on top of that, Miles Sanders, as talented and explosive as he might be, he's had some of the biggest rushing plays against some good defenses last season of anyone in the league. I think he ripped off 370-plus yard carries last year against tough matchups at the time, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and the New Orleans Saints. Now it's obviously a different season. We've got new coaching staff, a whole new offense, so that's besides the point. Just speaking to Sanders' talent here, they don't use him. The volume that the running backs are receiving for the Philadelphia Eagles offense right now is terribly frustrating. I mean, we're talking like 10 total touches on a per-game basis sometimes for the entire backfield outside of Jalen Hurts, because this team likes to think that they can use Jalen Hurts to keep defensive units honest, and they don't give enough touches, in my opinion, to these running backs. So you've already got that working against Miles Sanders. The coaching staff, the play calling, whatever is resulting in this is already eating into his fantasy value and reducing the overall floor that he can have. Obviously, like I said, I still think he has some element of a ceiling value because he can rip off explosive plays. But man, I mean, the volume there is just so detrimental to his fantasy value. You add in this tough matchup, and this makes him virtually unstartable, in my opinion, this week. Now, of course, when the odds are stacked against Miles Sanders here, like you heard me talk about earlier when they were last season, this will be the game that he rips off that 70-yard rush. But on paper, everything is screaming, sit Miles Sanders on the bench right now. You don't want to face the ugly point total that I'm expecting from him this week. I think it could be a very low touch count. I think that if the trend continues for the Eagles, they're going to drop back and pass the ball a ton, and they're going to try and attack this weak secondary of the Buccaneers and use Jalen Hurts' legs to formulate somewhat of that run game, and like I said, keep the defense somewhat fairly honest here. So Miles Sanders, keep him out of all lineups and all scoring formats. Not somebody I'm at all excited about here this week on Thursday Night Football. A quick note before we jump into Devontae Booker here is that Gronk is out for that game, so make sure he's on your benches as well and not in that starting lineup. Devontae Booker. So, the Giants, man, the truth lies in the injury report here. This offense is going to be insanely one-dimensional this week. Devontae Booker is going to be like their only hope of offensive production, and this is a defense that has very good players to stop the run game. You're probably not going to have Daniel Jones. He is very iffy in the concussion protocol right now. And virtually every starting level wide receiver for this team is going to be either very dinged up heading into this game. I mean, all of their statuses for Sunday afternoon is up in the air. Kadarius Toney's got an ankle injury. Kenny Galladay, a hyperextended knee. We're still waiting on Shepard and Slayton's hamstring injuries. They could potentially be rolling into this game with John Ross and C.J. Board as their number 1 and 2 wide receivers. And they've got to deal with Jalen Ramsey on the back end, who is definitely not going to need to shadow either one of those guys. But if he did, I'd probably be John Ross because of that speed. But you're not going to have much of a passing game. Add in the fact that if you are asking Mike Glennon in relief of Danny Dimes, if he is ruled out with a concussion, to try and lead this talent-depleted offense, it's going to be just an absolute mess out there. Devontae Booker, like I said, he is no star running back. The ceiling was already capped here. Obviously, Saquon Barkley has that golf ball-sized ankle, and I believe that was a sprain that's going to keep him out 2 to 4 weeks here. You're not really working with much. This is already not a very good offensive line. You've got to try and run the football on Aaron Donald. There's just so many things working against the Giants offense right now. You cannot rely on any of their players, and it's going to be something that I am staying away from like the Black Plague this week. So don't start Devontae Booker. The Rams, already a tough matchup as it is. Add in all the things working against New York. Super, super tough situation. Josh Jacobs. Now, Jacobs is a player, if you've been watching the channel here, especially throughout the offseason, you've known I am not very high in the ceiling. I'm not a big Josh Jacobs fantasy advocator, and I've stayed away from him in all leagues. I don't own a single share of Josh Jacobs this NFL season, and the road gets a little bit tougher here. John Gruden, I'm sure you've all heard the news, out as the Raiders head coach. It's week 6. That is an uh-oh moment for an offense that is led by John Gruden. He is more of an offensive mind and has more of a hand in this offensive play calling than he does on the defensive side of the ball. And that's tough when on a week's notice, you have to transition from a head coach to, you can't even call it a new regime here because they've just got an interim head coach who's stepping up from being in an assistant role to lead this team. Now, they're not going to switch to a completely different playbook or switch to an entirely different style of offense here in week 6. But it's still an adjustment, and it's still something that can't go without mentioning here, is that you're playing a tough and stingy Denver Broncos defensive unit. This is no easy game, and for Josh Jacobs, who is already not usually a very efficient running back, doesn't have, now his receiving numbers have been trending upwards in the game he's healthy this season as compared to his previous NFL years, but he's still not a super dynamic player and a guy who is giving you a ton of production in that end of things. So Josh Jacobs, I have very real concerns for this entire Raiders offense as a whole, and you'll hear me talk about that a little bit more in my must-bench wide receivers episode. But I think that changing, again, from a head coach who was leading this team for the last few years now to an interim head coach on a week's notice, a lot of distractions and noise around this franchise and NFL team, I think that there's a little bit too much for me to like Josh Jacobs in this matchup, again, against a very solid Denver defense. I think their strength is more on the back end of things here, but they have also got no joke of a run defense as well. So something I'm avoiding if possible for a lot of teams, especially now that we're into bye weeks. We have less options to pull from here. Josh Jacobs is certainly a lower end one for me here in week 6. Mark Ingram. Now, this one isn't even so much about the matchup for me as it is about the team situation and the overall upside and floor that I project for this Texans run game on a week-to-week basis. Mark Ingram has been a frequent feature on the must-sit list for me, and again, going back to the fact that we have reduced and limited options because of bye weeks here, in week 6, I'm still very, very low on Mark Ingram and what he can bring to the table for us. I talked about this back in week 2. I thought week 1 was a ceiling. Against the Jags, the numbers he put up, the surprising stat line that he had in that game, I didn't really see a way that he could get better than that or improve himself to a greater extent than he did in that season opening game for the Houston Texans. Last week, incredibly inefficient numbers. This has been the trend since that week 1 game. And granted, who were the Texans playing last week? It was Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. What do they like to do? They approach teams with a defensive mindset. They're going to take away your best offensive weapon and make you beat them some other way. That's what they did. They made the Texans rely on Davis Mills to drop back, pass, and beat them by throwing the football. And he dang near did it until Mac Jones came back and won this football game late. But Mark Ingram, 16 carries, 41 yards. That's not even 3 yards a touch here. So you're already looking at a player he's been around the league for a while now. He is a very seasoned veteran, not in the peak of his prime from an athleticism standpoint. I just don't see a way that he gives you quality RB2 numbers or even makes his way into flex level value for week 6 here. You're talking really deep leagues if he's going to be getting into your starting lineup here. It's just not a situation I want to deal with. So Mark Ingram, sit him down on the bench. He's probably still rostered in quite a large handful of leagues. But in terms of starting NFL running backs for the 32 teams out there, this is probably on a week-to-week basis the lowest upside and floor value that we get out of any of them. And then James Conner here. I talked about this last week. I've touched on this briefly throughout the past couple of weeks now. But James Conner is a disaster waiting to happen in fantasy lineups. The inflation of touchdown numbers he's had the last 3 games have been very misleading, and this is going to lead to a very, very ugly point output for fantasy managers that continue to start him religiously if that becomes the case scenario because of how dependent he is on that touchdown production. Chase Edmonds is the running back to own in this Cardinals offense. He gets the passing volume. He's very efficient. He'll make explosive plays. That's not James Conner's game. He is a standard play, if anything at all. He is a bruising back that comes in short yardage situations and just blows over the defense for 1, 2, 3 yards and gets the first down or touchdown. Outside of that, he doesn't have much value to this offense. In his last 3 games, he's averaging just 40 yards rushing. If you take the touchdowns away, at best, you're getting 4 fantasy points. Not a big and frequent pass catcher, not someone that goes out there and makes explosive plays. You are solely betting and relying on him to find the end zone in a given matchup. Now, the Browns kind of got flamed by Austin Eckler last week. They even dragged him into the end zone and inflated his numbers even more so he could score 6 and give the Browns the ball back very quickly. But that's not who James Conner is. He's not shifty, elusive, a dynamic pass catcher like Austin Eckler. If anything, Chase Edmonds might be the running back you project for the big game, quote unquote, here if he's able to continue through the injury report and be healthy for Sunday's matchup. So James Conner, another running back I'm staying away from here. Not even the starter for his team, but still a player who's been productive for us to this point. I'm still sitting him down here, even with the reduced options, again, going back to that bye week and the fact that we're now missing a handful of teams because they're on the rest. Alrighty, those were 5 must-bench running backs for Week 6 fantasy football action. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit that like button and let others know that you found this video useful and help them find our content so that they can utilize us and have us as a fantasy tool for them this fantasy season. If you've got questions about your lineup specifically, drop those down in the comment section below, and I'm happy to get back to as many of you as possible during the rest of the week until Sunday afternoon's games and whatnot get started here for Week 6 action. So, with that being said, thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode. Go check out some of the other videos from this week that we've posted here, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.